Welcome to this webinar on patient decision aids. This is the second in our series, and this topic today is on implementing into the clinical practice. Our speakers today are Chelsea Hagopian and Dr. Laurie Cassis. So just a couple of reminders before we get started. We will be using the chat function for the Q&A today, so please do post all your questions there. We've also asked everybody to post in the chat what you hope to learn today about shared decision-making and patient decision aids. So we will be monitoring the chat throughout, and we will make sure to cover all of your questions. Just a disclaimer before we get started that the information presented may not be the position of the Aesthetic Society, and that this information is relevant as of today, November 16, 2020. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on surgery.org within 24 to 48 hours, and we will be sending out an email to everybody to let you know when it's posted and available for you to share. In the interest of preserving bandwidth, we do ask that people stay muted and keep your cameras off with the exception of our presenters today. Lastly, I'd like to thank Allergan Aesthetics for their support and for the provision of an educational grant to help us present this series for you. I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Mindy Haws. She's our moderator today. She also serves as the treasurer, the communications commissioner, and the co-chair of our Informed Consent Task Force. Dr. Haws, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on what for some of you is a very early Monday morning. Little bit of background. I am a plastic surgeon in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Laurie Casas is a very well-established plastic surgeon in Chicago. And we met Chelsea Hagopian, a nurse practitioner, last year at the FDA hearings. And that's when Laurie and I really learned about patient decision aids and how these really are the wave of the future. Chelsea is a clinical instructor at the Emory University Nell Hodgkin Woodruff School of Nursing. That's where she completed her doctorate of nurse practitioner in health systems leadership. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Chelsea, who's our resident expert, and we wouldn't be here without her. Chelsea, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Haws, and good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak with you today. I thank all of you for this opportunity, and I look forward to some engaging discussion throughout the presentation. So the focus of today's discussion is on shared decision-making and implementing in practice a patient decision aid, PDA, we have developed for use with adult females actively considering primary breast augmentation surgery with implants. I'll begin with a brief presentation just to provide an overview of key concepts and how the PDA is intended to be used in practice, after which I'll turn it over to Dr. Cassis to share about her early experiences, insights, and patient feedback using the PDA in her practice, as well as to Dr. Haws to share her perspective for how she plans to use the PDA in her practice. We'll then wrap up with an opportunity for Q&A and some more discussion. So patient decision aids, PDAs, are evidence-based tools that help patients meaningfully participate in decision-making about healthcare options. More than an educational pamphlet or website, there are three defining characteristics. A PDA, one, makes explicit the decision or decisions that need to be made, the options and their features. Two, helps patients to clarify and communicate their values and preferences. And three, empowers patients and clinicians to work together to make informed decisions based on the clinically appropriate options, the best available scientific evidence, and what matters most to patients. The active process of bilateral communication and collaboration requiring meaningful input from both the patient and the clinician is termed shared decision-making. There are a few key concepts that are helpful to review when implementing shared decision-making and patient decision aids in practice, as certain characteristics about a decision make them more or less amenable to certain types of decision support interventions, such as shared decision-making and patient decision aids. And this also helps to explain why shared decision-making is important in plastic surgery and how patient decision aids can best be used to support quality decision-making. So decisions about plastic surgery are preference sensitive, meaning there's more than one clinically appropriate option with no clear best option that is right for everyone. For example, when deciding between saline and silicone implants, neither option is best for everyone. Rather, which option is best depends largely on the values and the preferences of the individual patient. The main difference between a patient decision aid and an informed consent document is that an informed consent document is focused on clinician disclosure and treated as just a signature on a form after decisions have been made, while a patient decision aid is an evidence-based interactive tool useful before, during, and after decision making. A large and growing body of evidence strongly supports that shared decision-making and PDAs work. Patient decision aids improve patient knowledge about their options, the risks and benefits, and help patients to feel more informed and clear about what matters most to them. Essentially, patient decision aids help patients, surgeons, and everyone involved in the process communicate with each other so everyone's on the same page. So before moving on to reviewing some of the key features of the PDA, which is entitled Making Quality Decisions About Primary Breast Augmentation Surgery, I just want to check in to see if there are any questions or if Dr. Haws or Dr. Cassis have any comments they'd like to add for discussion.
All I wanted to add is I think our dream is that for the PDA to become such a part of the information on the internet, such a part of the lexicon of breast augmentation patients, that we know when our patients come in, whether they've gotten this PDA from our office or for somewhere else, they have standardized information and we know what that information is. We know where it came from. We want an educated patient when they walk through the door with the education we want them to have.
Dr. Cassis, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I will share with you how I've implemented it, but the key here is this provides a clear, concise tool for the patient, and then for your consultation, and then for the patient to take home with them. So it's just a tool, and we understand that everybody has a great way of doing informed consent already. However, this will give you a tool that all I can tell you is it's been great in my practice, and I'll share with you how I implemented it.
Great, thank you so much. So let's talk about how to use this patient decision aid. It's designed to be used in 3 parts. It helps prepare patients to have a discussion, it helps engage them during the discussion, and it helps confirm that they've made the right decision for them, the decision they'll be happy with. It's structured in 5 independent sections that can be used individually based on the patient's needs. And again, it empowers everyone on the team with evidence-based information to best support the patient's decision-making wherever they are in their decision-making process. So each section can be used based on if they're at the preparation stage or at the consultation stage or afterwards to just continuously review. I'm just going to touch on a few key sections just to highlight how they're useful in different stages of decision making. So the section in green, there's 2 different pages. The one on the left is on page 2 of the patient decision aid, and the one on the right is on page 9. And this is really geared towards helping patients to kind of orient to their active role in decision making, as well as to give them a little bit of a compass to guide to how to evaluate the quality of information online or where they learn otherwise. And it really helps to engage them right at the outset. The knowledge quiz that's shown on the right of this slide helps patients to prepare by checking to see how well the patient decision aid or other resources that they have used have prepared them with great knowledge. And it also signifies to the plastic surgeon and the plastic surgery care team what the patient already knows and where it might be best to focus a little bit more education during a consultation and subsequent encounters. I really think this quote nicely summarizes the rationale for this section. So patients who have access to high quality evidence and health information and who also possess e-health literacy skills to make sense of it can most meaningfully engage in shared decision making about their care. And that's what we want. I want to point out the value clarification exercises. So there are a few sections where it's asking patients to think about what are their concerns and what type of shape they like best. And that way it helps to guide how they should think about their options and then move into weighing the risks and benefits with their plastic surgeon. Another key feature of a patient decision aid is that it explicitly states the decisions that are needing to be made before surgery. So for example, shown here, decision 1 is implant fill. So they need to decide between saline and silicone implants. The second decision list shown here, implant shape. So it helps to kind of structure that education that you're already doing, and it just makes it, it supports you and the patient. There's a consultation guide to facilitate frequently asked questions that patients ask when coming in for breast augmentation consultation, a section for notes, as well as each section is color-coded if they want to go back and reference things that they have written, made notes about, or their values clarification exercises, they can refer back to during the consultation. It just makes it easy. There's a section for additional resources to be written. And so that way, if there are practice-specific websites or other tools that y'all like to use, you can populate it here. So this serves as just that reference guide and compass where all of their information can be located. Then the last section of this patient decision aid includes 2 validated scales: the SURE test and the effective decision subscale of the traditional decisional conflict scale. And I think it's important just to take a couple of minutes here to review the concept of decisional conflict, because reliably recognizing and addressing decisional conflict during decision making really is critical to the success of any informed consent process. So decisional conflict is defined as, quote, a state of uncertainty about a course of action. Empirical evidence has demonstrated that for every unit increase in the decisional conflict scale, patients were 19% more likely to blame their doctor for bad outcomes. And additionally, decisional conflict was an independent predictor of blame. But most importantly is that decisional conflict is a modifiable construct that can be lowered with decision support interventions such as PDAs. And so on the page shown on the left of this slide is the SURE test, which is a shorter screening version of the decisional conflict scale, and it's intended for use in everyday clinical practice. So it screens if the patient feels informed and clear about their values, so which risks and benefits matter most to them, if the patient feels they have enough support for decision making, and lastly, if the patient is sure about which option is best for them. This is specifically relevant because the SURE screening test can indicate the probability that a patient experiences clinically significant decisional conflict. And the SURE test is scored by simply applying a value of 1 to each item marked yes, and a value of 0 to each item marked no, and then calculating a sum total uncertainty score that can range from 0, which would signify extremely high decisional conflict, to 4, signifying no decisional conflict. And then a score equal to or less than 3 indicates decisional conflict. It is recommended to administer the full 16-item decisional conflict scale in the context of a positive SURE screening test. However, I feel a more practical approach is to review the suggested activities listed below the SURE test. And this is on page 11 of the PDA. So it's what's shown on the left of this slide. And based on the patient's specific area of uncertainty, address those needs and then repeating the SURE test, or if desired at that point, the full decisional conflict scale. And then on the next page shown on the right is the second validated scale, the effective decision subscale of the traditional decisional conflict scale. And to score this, items are given a score value of 0 for strongly agree to 4 for strongly disagree. Then you add it together, divide it by 4, and multiply it by 25. And scores range from 0 indicating a good decision to 100 indicating a bad decision. So most importantly here is that the use of these validated scales applies an evidence-based approach to confirming patient readiness to make a decision and the validity of informed consent. Keeping in mind that decision-making and informed consent processes should be evidence-based, not arbitrary. So it helps to ensure that the decision needs are met and that you're targeting education most effectively to what the patient needs. So now I'd like to check in with Dr. Cassis just to see if she would like to share some of her early experiences with using the PDA.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, so the biggest thing that I took away from meeting Chelsea was this is going to allow me to have a tool like I discussed. I know that all of us do informed consent in probably very, very comprehensive ways, but this allows us to have something that what we did in our practice was we prepare the patient for the consultation. So we send the PDA in a PDF format, either by email or by text, to the patient when they make the consultation. And I do charge for consultation, so they're already engaged in the sense that, you know, they've already paid to come. So they get the PDA in a PDF format, and we ask them to review the important pages 3 through 10, because those really talk about breast augmentation versus the general concept of, you know, seeing a plastic surgeon, making the decision to see one, et cetera, because they've already kind of made that decision. Then how do we go to the next level? Well, when they get to my office, they're brought into the exam room, have their photos taken, and then given a copy if they didn't bring a copy. Of course, the best is if they bring a copy of they have notes all over it, et cetera. But if they don't, then we give them another copy. And again, they're encouraged for, after their photos, for about 5-10 minutes to review it. Nobody's with them, they're alone. Then I come into the room and we start the process, which quite frankly, I haven't really changed very much because I've always believed in a collaborative approach, you know, to having the surgery, what, you know, implants to choose. So, you know, implant decision making, and then finally to decide to move forward. I've never seen a patient once then operated on them. So I've always seen them in a pre-op visit once they've scheduled and are sure that they're going to make the decision. So when they prepare, then they engage with me during their consultation, and then they schedule or not, they can come back again. I have them pay each time they come, and then that's subtracted from, you know, my surgical fee. So I've always encouraged a lot of engagement. And then at the time of their pre-op visit, that's when we confirm together that they've made the, you know, the correct decision to move forward. And I've always done that pre-op visit 3 to 4 weeks before the surgery. So there's plenty of time for the patient to completely be sure that they want to proceed with the procedure. So that's kind of how I've implemented. So it hasn't added any time to my practice consultation time. I have never had a nurse or an MA or a practice a consultant or a practice manager work with my patients on decision making. So that's not been part of my practice ever. So this has actually just helped me a lot because it's all concise and consolidated. and easy to read. Patients love it. They're very, very pleased. And it sets me apart, and has been since we started to use it, because no other doctor provides this kind of information and joint decision-making tools that they can walk away with, so they go home with something in their hands if they hadn't brought it with them to the consultation. So it's been amazing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Awesome. Hey, while we've got a little break here, Sue has a survey we'd like to do really quick with those of you on the webinar, just to kind of see where you're at. So go ahead and fill this out if you can. Just 2 questions. And then in just a minute or so, once you fill it out, we'll see our results. All right, hopefully everybody is finishing up. And we'll see where we're at.
We've got about half of our people who voted, so I'll go ahead and end.
Okay, that'd be great.
Show the results.
All right, so most are using ASPS consents, but there's 4 of you, 4%, so 1 person using the patient decision aids.
That would be
And
me.
then a lot of us on here are plastic surgeons. Excellent. Okay, Chelsea, you're up.
I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Haws, as well, as far as your early experiences or how you plan to use in practice, as you might have a different perspective than Dr. Cassis that I think might be useful for the audience.
We have only just started using the PDA, but what we have found, we were playing with, do we send it to the patients ahead of time? Do we let them look at it when they come in for consultation? And what we have found uniformly is that if they don't get it ahead of time, they have no interest in looking at it when they first come in for the consultation. They're already engaged. They already have their thought process one way. They don't look at it. And we'll skip to the last page that talks about choices and implants, but it needs to go out, I think, to patients ahead of time so that they're engaged with it and so that you get a better flow. Otherwise, for us anyway in the office, they're already on a different track. They're like, no, I've already done this. They already have the information they think is correct, not necessarily the information I want them to have.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really important to consider, that each section of this patient decision aid can be used independent from each other. So I know that when first looking at the patient decision aid, it may seem like, oh my goodness, there's so many pages in this. It's very complicated, but at least that when you see that each section is really independent of each other, then you can target it to the specific patient's needs. So if they're at that preparation stage, which I think is, I agree, the most useful time to review this and start to consider and think about what matters most to them, orient their thinking as far as how they should weigh risks and benefits and which values are relevant to consider, and then engage in a productive shared decision-making dialogue once they arrive at the practice. But it's great to know that, when patients are coming in, if they haven't seen it, it's still useful by just going even straight to the consultation page and then sending it home with patients to reflect on as they wish. They don't have to complete it from start to finish. It really can be targeted to their needs. So thank you so much for that. And now I would like to check in to see if there are any questions or anything from the attendees that they would like to focus more discussion on or clarify.
While we're waiting for questions, there's a couple questions I think would really help. Laurie, what do you think was the learning curve in your office to really get this up and going? And Chelsea, what do you see as learning curve?
In our office, there wasn't much because, again, we've always sent things to patients before their consultations. So it's nothing new. It's just something different. And instead of clouding their, sort of information that they get before their breast aug consultation that we used to send, this is just one document that we have them look at before. Then when they come in, we have other documents that we give them as well, updating them on BII, ALCL, et cetera, et cetera. So, the FDA's latest, comments to manufacturers regarding labeling, et cetera, but that they get when they arrive to the office. So nothing's really changed. The consultation time has still always been the same, 10 minutes to get them photographed and review documents and things if they hadn't. And then I spend anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes with them. And then they come back if they want before their pre-op visit, if they haven't scheduled. And those are usually like 10, 15, 20-minute discussions. So it really hasn't been a learning curve. For me, I guess it was more of having everything I've been doing during my consultations all consolidated, into a format that's so easy to read.
So it just supports what you're already doing. That's great. I think that when looking at a potential learning curve, I think that we get so used to giving informed consent documents after the decision making has already happened, and now having at least a tool to really engage in that preparation standpoint, I think is probably likely the biggest shift of just getting it to patients beforehand to help them before ever engaging in the conversation.
We had one really important question that I can't believe we brought out, and that is how to get the PDA to people. And I think Sue can share the link. We can certainly email it to you, but there's also a link on surgery.org that has the PDA documents that you can download, and someone suggested they're going to put them on their website, which I think is a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I did put it on the website, but it's super easy to download it as a PDF. And most of us have smartphones that, you can read a PDF. So it's really fun for them. So they, or on their iPad or by email. We just ask them, what format, what vehicle do you want us to send you the pre-consultation information? And so then they tell us either text, email. Nobody, since I started this, has asked for anything by mail, snail mail.
Yeah, and hopefully by having this document, if we put it on our websites, then it's going to be one more way to catch patients. It's one more way to market. It's one more way to show that you are cutting edge. You have this very interesting and very complete patient engagement and patient consultation and patient consent process that's going to make us stand out from the pretenders. Let's see if we got some other questions. We talked about briefly how you would break this up. Like, I think, Laurie, you said that you suggest patients look at pages 3 through 10 before they come into the consultation.
Right.
So when they get in the consultation, even if they haven't looked at it, then the questions, which I think on page 10 are probably the important thing to have in front of them after they get their pictures. Look over these questions, make sure you're going to get these answered while you're in. How else do you feel like we can break this up, Chelsea?
I think it's really recognizing where the patient is and in talking with them, seeing where there are decisional needs. I think that by engaging with, if patients have already come in, they haven't used it yet, even if they start with the what are my next steps after consultation, and they work through to see how they feel, how comfortable they feel about deciding, and using these scales here, it can maybe bring out some decision support needs that they didn't realize they had. And then by reviewing these questions underneath, it gives suggested ways to help reconcile that decisional need, and then it directs people back to the sections of the patient decision aid that maybe they need to spend a bit more time with, or ask their surgeon for follow-up information.
Great. And these are pages 11 and 12. So if you get someone who's not interacting with it or has done all that, feels like they know, you can jump right to page 11 and 12, which for us as the surgeon, or whether you have a nurse educator in your practice, makes that easier, I think, to break it up. And then, as we said, to give the patient the entire patient decision aid, whether electronically, whether handing it to them, so that they take it with them. I know Dr. Cassis had talked to me about how she's shown this to patients who are established in her practice, and they felt like the biggest difference was there wasn't anything new there, but they actually had something they could take home with them that actually documented everything that had been talked about in the consent process. And Chelsea didn't go over that here, but people don't remember everything that they're told. They actually remember a very small piece of what they're told. And so this really does make the patient feel that they have a better informed consent.
Well, I think also patients, when they come to a board certified plastic surgeon, especially members of ASAPs, they're getting a lot of information. So they're either taking notes or they ask to, tape record, which is so weird, the consultation. So it's super, roll back. I just had for the first time someone say, oh, my significant other who's going to take care of me wanted to be here. Could we FaceTime the consultation? That was so weird. Never had that happen before. But anyway, the most important thing is that they have to engage. We all know that. They have to have information. We all know that. But this allows us to give them something to take home with them. They can write notes on it. It's amazing. It's really been great. I'm super excited about this, and I'm hoping all of you are too.
And this screenshot shows just what we were talking about, the forgetting curve, which I really like this, which is what I always tell patients. Doctors only remember about 25% of what they're told, but this shows you after 6 days, you forget 75% of what you heard in the consultation. And that's what patients are then dealing with. And this gives them a refresher right in their hand.
Absolutely. And it's something that we know that most patients considering breast augmentation surgery have been thinking about it for quite a while before ever coming in for consultation. And they have maybe read a lot of information online, learned a lot of information, but still may not have learned the essential information that's necessary for their decision making. And so this really kind of brings it back to where we need to focus and consider when weighing the risks and benefits and having those really important conversations with their plastic surgeon.
Chelsea, why don't we wait and see if there's any more questions? Something that had come up on the physician only call was, does this replace my other consent document? Is this enough? Is this consent? And given that I know people who use a one-page consent, I would say for many people, yeah, it probably is plenty. But if you could answer that for us, that would be great.
And I was going to say, just so everybody knows, unfortunately, and Chelsea will go over it, this hasn't been adopted in plastic surgery in terms of medical legally adopted. So I still, of course, use a legal document like, the very passive ASPS informed consent. So that I have something medical legally that will stand up. But to me, this is, well, it's the future period, but for us, hopefully it's the future sooner than later.
Absolutely. That's a really important question. And it's very interesting, just as you said, Dr. Haws, that it hasn't been quite adopted completely in plastic surgery practice quite yet, the patient decision aids. And so because the way the law is in most states, it recognizes what is the typical practice as kind of your standard for evaluation of that. And so until we get to that tipping point of where most people are using this in practice, it can't completely replace it. It is designed to, but we haven't quite gotten to that point where it can replace it. So rather than it being, I would consider the informed consent document as supplementary to this. So rather than having it as two distinct entities, having this as the primary educational tool and that informed consent document is supplementary. Now, in Washington State, they have changed their informed consent law to a shared decision-making standard that recognizes the use of patient decision aids as prima facie evidence of informed consent. So in that state, it's a bit of a different story, but for most other states, it's still, I would have the informed consent document is supplementary to this. And then of course, having your malpractice company review it. And hopefully the goal is that this is where the future is going as far as informed consent. It's really more empowered consent. So we're getting there.
And I think, again, I think we all know that the people on this call are already doing amazing, shared decision-making consultations with your patients. But I think you'll find once you get used to this format that it'll be extremely useful.
Do we have any further questions?
Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating. I feel like we covered the questions we wanted to make sure were covered and have answered your questions. Again, hopefully this is just one more way to make the patients feel like they are educated, because, surgeon education and patient education are the two main goals of the Aesthetics Society. And we want to help you in your office do that, as well as help the patients feel that we care about them in every way that we can. So please don't hesitate to let us know. This will be available, I'm sure, in the next few days for review if you want to share it with any of your other office staff. Anything else anybody wants to add?
Thank you everyone for the opportunity to share this presentation. And I really do truly appreciate everyone's time and interest in this work. And I do look forward to any further questions or comments or feedback anyone has as they review the patient decision aid and start to use it in practice.
Thank you all very much. We really appreciate Chelsea and Dr. Cassis and Dr. Haws for your time today, and everybody who joined us. And many thanks to Allergan for their support of this program. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.